See where it says grounded in literacy for adults? That's one of the values. Outreach to adults is the foundation because reaching the adult is the critical first step in addressing the literacy needs of the entire family. So when your city council member comes and says, why aren't you serving kids in school? You can say, well, because this is the primary focus. And it's not because we don't love kids in school, but it's because the service we provide is not available elsewhere for the parents of those children, okay? And that's something, you all have heard the term mission creep. Use this to keep yourself from mission creep, okay? Again, it's not because we don't care about those things. All those issues are important. Children's literacy and, English as a second language, they're all really important. It's just that we're the only ones who focus on these people who have no other place to go. These are people who can't read well enough to go to the adult school. They can't read well enough to go to the community college. And are they easy to find? No, they are hiding. Okay, so a lot of times what will happen is a well-meaning library director will say to you, come on, let's do ESL. There's all these hundreds of English language learners in the foyer asking for help, right? Because they're not hard to find. They don't have anything, they're not ashamed, they just want to learn English, right? Our folks have been living with this their whole lives and they feel ashamed in many cases. They're not going to just step right up and say, hey, howdy, teach me how to read. Until something big happens to them, right? Usually, and you can all, I see the heads nodding, when a crisis happens in an adult's life who hasn't been able to read, and I always think of two people who I heard years ago in AmeriCorps training who really stuck with me. One was the man who's a contractor whose wife did all the bookkeeping and accounting for him, and they got a divorce. Okay? All of a sudden, he had to bring himself out of the shadows and step up to the literacy program. And then there was Tammy, who remembers Tammy, whose husband was diagnosed with a very serious illness. She was his only caregiver, and she couldn't read the prescription label. Okay? That's what brought her in. She had been a grown woman living this hidden life of not being able to read. Very few people knew about it. But once a point in her life came about where she couldn't avoid it any longer. That's what brings our people in. So when you say, well, we can't find them, it's not because you're bad at finding them. It's because they're really good at hiding, right? And it's not that we have more need for ESL because they're here and the adult learners aren't. It's that we have to go find them and look for them and reach out to them and welcome them in so that they feel like they can be part of what they really want to do with their lives. I wanted to point out there's one about inclusive of English as a second language. While the primary focus of California Library Literacy Services is literacy for English-speaking adults, we appreciate those libraries that have targeted ESL parents through the English Language Literacy Intensive Program or have identified other resources to provide ESL services in communities where there is a need. So if you truly don't have an ESL service in your community, that may be a focus. That may be something you want to develop. But what we want you to think about is, don't just develop it because it seems like the thing to do, especially if the resource is already out there in the community. Because then you're duplicating resources with very limited funds. And that's where I start to see mission creep, right? There's a couple of programs right now. I just finished reading the final reports. Yes, they do get read. I just finished reading them, and I've seen a couple of programs that have just veered off the adult literacy trail, and they're putting most of their effort into ESL. And my question to them is that because there's not another service in your program? And do you remember that that's not what we're about? But besides the philosophical issue related to that, they lose money from us because we fund based on what you do in adult literacy, not based on what you do in ESL. Okay, and I'll show you how the formula works in a little bit. Let's see if there's another one here. Always free to the learner. Okay, you could charge a corporation who wants to send some of their folks to you if you want, but you can't charge the learner. Even there are a few of our programs who charge the tutors for the materials. That's a choice you decide. There's not very many, but we don't have a rule about not charging the tutors to do this, but we do have a rule about not charging the learners to do this. Well situated for learning. This is one of my favorites. We believe the library is uniquely suited for library literacy services as it provides a comfortable, supportive, enriching atmosphere for learners and their families. If you're not helping those people learn how to use the library and getting them a library card, you're missing a huge boat here. So keep that in mind. And those of you who don't use the word library in your name, that always makes me sad, because I think that's part of what's unique here, right? We have this incredible resource behind us that other organizations don't have. So if you don't provide the service, all of it in the library, if you provide it elsewhere, if the tutors meet in other places, we want to be sure you make sure that the learners and the tutors understand that this is part of the library program and that they have access to a world of amazing things for themselves at the library. Learner goal oriented. This is really important. We don't just bring learners in and test them to see what grade they read at and say, okay, we're going to take you from 2nd grade to 3rd grade this year. Instead, we're focused on what their needs are. What's the thing that brought them in the door? Remember what I said is usually they've come for a particular reason. They have to get a commercial driver's license, and they can't read the test. So that's where you're going to start with these folks. You're going to give them what they need, the underpinnings to get to that place, but you're going to start there because they're going to stay if they see the benefit of staying. They're going to stay if they see that you're going to help them get done what they need to accomplish in their real lives. And the beauty of it is once they've accomplished that one, then they start to, a whole new world opens up. Oh, I could vote. Oh, I could be a volunteer in my community. Oh, I could take a test for a promotion at work. I could help my kids with homework. So wherever they are is where we start with them. And that's what that whole learner goal-centered piece is about. These were not just developed in a vacuum. This was actually one of the things I worked on when I first came, and we had meetings with literacy coordinators all around the state where we had these great philosophical conversations. We had several lists that went back and forth out on the listserv, and this is what we've been living with now for probably about 13 years. So it's working for us, and we want you to know how important it is. So how about the program essentials? Any surprises there? These are the things that you have to do in order to be called a CLLS library, okay? There's other nonprofits and other organizations that do adult literacy services out there. And all of our programs are a little bit different, right? You may use different materials. You may have a different training program. There's lots of things you do differently. But the bottom line is you're all meeting these program essentials. And if you're not, then you can't call yourself a CLLS library. Okay, so the bottom line is not that we want to prescribe for you every detail of how your program is going to operate, but we do want to say that we have a consistent service that we're delivering in libraries throughout the state. That's really what this is about. Libraries that choose to provide additional family literacy services to their adult learners with children under 5 will comply with these program essentials. Okay, so the adult and family ones are all on the same page. As I said, you are not required to do family literacy, especially if you're new and you don't want to start that. Don't feel like you have to. There's not all of our libraries do that, but if you do want to do it, it needs to comply with these program essentials. And for those of you who have ELLI or the mobile service, these are the program essentials for those. We're not starting any new ELLI or mobile library programs. But there's still, I'm happy to say, some programs still out there thriving. They receive local funding for those, so it's pretty awesome.